No worries. We're very patient. We're very used to these difficulties by now.
Yeah.
No worries. This will give folks a little bit of time to get a cup of coffee or.
Good. Yes, I could use a cup of coffee.
And so let me say, while Drew's working on this, this is really, one of Drew's toughest projects. He's really learning what it's like to be a public servant, working on a project that has gotten a little contentious with some people. And so this is one where we're getting both good and bad. We've gotten lots of good comments, and we've got several people that have not enjoyed the project. And so that's one of the reasons why we are doing this presentation tonight, to get some information out there. Drew has been collecting data on the project and with the usage before and after. And so this is definitely has been learning what it's like to be a public employee. And
Sure am. All right. Well, we'll see here. I will share my screen one. How's that going?
Perfect.
Very good. Okay, so I apologize in advance. Some of these slides are text heavy. I hate text heavy slides, but I just put together this presentation over the past couple days, and please bear with me. This is essentially the interim summary report for this pilot program that we started in with the first Healthy Street in mid-July. The project was actually originally envisioned in late April, kind of when we were all realizing that COVID wasn't going to be going away anywhere anytime soon. And the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Boards and Traffic Commission all began discussing about the changing personal realities for most people in terms of how they're traveling, the types of opportunities they have available to them for recreation. Certainly, you all are probably familiar. Organized sports, particularly for children, have been on a bit of a roller coaster in terms of availability. But definitely back then, we thought that they would never be offered ever again, right? Schools have been shutting down. The availability for again, typical activities is radically different. Another thing that we noticed back then, and which we are still noticing, is a general congestion of our existing recreational resources. I did a couple of drive-by studies of about 18 different trailheads around Morgantown, and about 80% of them were entirely full with vehicles on a reasonably nice day, full and overflowing. So we put our heads together and initially had discussed a project that we termed the neighborhood activity loops. And we began developing draft ideas for about 10 different loops that we would promote somehow. We hadn't figured that out back then, for people to use that we thought were already low stress, already established walking routes. There's a lot of research that suggests that the people that you see walking on the street always, we don't really need to worry about them as much as the people that you don't see walking on the street. It's this concept of a typology of essentially risk-taking and risk perception. And certainly with cyclists, there is research that suggests that up to 75% of the population is what you would call interested but hesitant. And essentially, those 75% of the population you won't be seeing typically on the street or out in public recreating on a typical neighborhood street. They do not feel as if the current and typical treatments that we do for to help improve life for pedestrians and cyclists and other non-motorized or light individual transport users is enough. So this program was really designed initially to appeal to that 75% of the population that is hesitant to recreate. And also, again, addressed some of these dwindling resources that we all had. More and more people had been using trails, and if anybody's familiar with the bicycle industry, it's exploding like it has not since 1970s. Bicycles are a hot commodity right now. If you have one, you can probably sell it for double what you bought it for. So with that being said, how can there we go. Great. I want to drive a little bit more into what is a healthy street. You've heard me mention neighborhood activity loops. We did not call them healthy streets. We called them healthy streets after the city received a petition in early June asking us to implement something that a number of other cities had implemented. Some of the common names that you hear with initiatives like this: Austin, Boston, many of the cities on the coasts and the larger cities had been implementing sort of radical, heavy traffic calming on these streets. So that's kind of the first thing that we adopted as well when we were designing this initiative is heavy traffic calming. The three existing projects in Morgantown right now, this picture is one on Wagner. We also have a very short project on Domain, the entire length of Domain in South Park. We got it wrong initially. I put that into Greenmont, but that's just on the line of Greenmont and South Park. And then the other one is Western Avenue. Not the entirety of Western Avenue, but Western Avenue from Longview to Somerset. So the other thing that makes a healthy street is all of these traffic calming devices and the increased presence of non-motorized, non-automobile users can help to transform some streets that are stressful into low stress corridors, or they can reinforce already perceived low stress corridors into even lower stress spaces for people to spread out and recreate. A lot of what we hear in terms of the language the citizens that have been developing this program and the other cities that are promoting this program is that a healthy street is a place, not just a means of travel. This is somewhat of a paradigm shift for how we think about streets. Certainly back in the 50s, in the golden age of the automobile, streets rapidly shifted from a place where you would find a lot of congestion caused by pedestrians to almost all the congestion over the past 70 years caused by motor vehicles. So, all around the country, not just with healthy streets, but with traffic calming in general and, additional bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, we attempt to, in some ways, connect people more with the places that are around them and allow them to utilize this public resource, which is the right-of-way, in more diverse ways. maybe get more added value out of our street network. The primary goal of Healthy Streets is simply to provide easily accessible spaces that promote mental and physical health for all Morgantown citizens. So the two pictures here that I'm showing for anybody that is vision impaired, one of them is an example of an empty street, indeed, on Wagner Avenue. It's a brick street, and there's a couple of our examples of traffic calming on that street. It includes sawhorses and some reflective cones. The other picture is taken from Western very recently. Both of these pictures are taken by me. And I just saw, when I was gathering some traffic counting data over there, picking up some counters on September 27th, a beautiful scene, right? People playing a catch like with a football, and what appeared to be a father and a variety of young children, perhaps related, maybe not, I'm not sure. A couple people walking dogs. It's great. You can see the relatively poor condition of the asphalt on Western. As an aside, one of the major interesting complaints that we have gotten about these projects are people that are frustrated with how we are choosing the streets, and they perceive these streets to be, perhaps rightfully so, relatively hostile to things like rollerblading, which is one of the pictographs or images that are shown on the Healthy Streets sign. Some people point out that wheelchair users would very much not probably drive down the center of Wagner. Not all of these projects are intended to be perfect. And we'll go into a little bit about how we choose them or how we evaluate them for their inclusion in the program. Another interesting comment that we got about Wagner is that somebody was very disappointed that we chose that as our first project, because it already has, as you can see here, sidewalks. Already has a somewhat of a formal pedestrian network. For a variety of reasons, including the moratorium on paving brick streets, we actually have not updated those ADA ramps on Wagner or those curb cuts. And so it is not quite an accessible street, more accessible with sidewalks than many. Certainly down on the lower picture, you can tell that Western has no sidewalks. Like much of Suncrest, there is a major lack of formal pedestrian infrastructure. Before I go into how we choose these streets, what was the inspiration for this initiative? I mentioned that there are a variety of other municipalities around the country that were doing this. You can see to the left there is an example of a street, appears to be a neighborhood street in Austin, Texas. Interestingly, that street is not closed to through traffic. All of the installations that we have currently done in Morgantown have been closed to through traffic. Although when we started the pilot initiative, we did state, and we still do hold to, not all of these projects require the closure of streets. But you can see that their traffic calming devices, similar, much larger, introduce a little bit more friction into people that are using that street in automobiles. So these other two images are from a respected Canadian transportation agency that has published a guide talking about how you might rebalance a street for the different types of users. Because people aren't needing to go to work as much, And certainly back when we initially came up with this idea, people were not working as much. You might actually see a radical shift in the types of users that you would find on any particular street. So how do you rebalance it to accommodate those new users? You can see in the image to the right, that's a screenshot from the National Association of City Transportation Officials website. And the program is kind of cut off there, but it says Streets for Pandemic Response and Recovery. So implied behind all of that, and a lot of my rhetoric here, is that this program was absolutely inspired by all of the pressures that have been placed upon society with the current pandemic. So what did we think of as potential benefits of this program? Pretty simple. I mentioned, our goal is to promote, mental and physical health. So we really wanted to allow people more space to spread out, to recreate in their own neighborhoods. The initial goal was to have some installation within 2 blocks of every single citizen in Morgantown. So very much walkable. Some people are comfortable walking a mile or 2 or 3 or 4. Some people are comfortable running 100 miles at once. Most people are not. So we really wanted to make this very accessible. Another tangential benefit is that it really allows us to quickly, temporarily, and cheaply implement neighborhood traffic calming. We have a backlog of traffic calming requests that have come into the Traffic Commission and the Engineering Department over the past 20 at least years that I'm aware of. And the process for evaluating those and implementing them takes at least 2 years, it seems. And the more important thing for me is that it rarely has incremental steps before we spend a lot of money to install things like speed humps or concrete chicanes. Chicanes, if you've been on Hoffman Street in the 3rd Ward, we have some asphalt, I believe, chicanes over there. They essentially force people to drive around them as if there were alternating cars parked on the side of the street. The traffic calming devices that we have placed on healthy streets are very similar to chicanes, at least in how they require vehicles to go around them. And again, these healthy streets are, we believe, providing what I call, again, light individual transport. We used to use non-motorized, but then all of a sudden we had all these motorized scooters and motorized bicycles and stuff. We still consider those, in a category that is separate from traditional automobiles. What are the potential downsides of this program? I think the most important thing for City Council is clearly negative public reactions, right, to profound changes in the transportation system. These are pretty big changes that we're making, right? Some of these roads, right, we are trying to strongly discourage non-local traffic from using them. Some longer travel time for people that live or would typically use that street as somewhat of a neighborhood cut through to get to someplace, right? For example, Western, we find an additional travel time of between 15 and 30 seconds, depending on if you hit the light at Aspen, than if you are going down Western. And then we are definitely putting these through traffic motorists onto busier streets. Our argument is that these busier streets are designed to handle significantly larger amounts of traffic than these neighborhood routes that we're typically choosing. And that larger amount of traffic, even if the street was totally at capacity before the pandemic, has certainly been affected from the pandemic, and so looks like Damien has requested an annotation mode on this, so maybe he'll draw some cool things.
No, sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Oh, nice. Okay. Little smiley face. And so, you know, a road like Collins Ferry is a state-owned route. It has very even grades on it, typically, much wider lanes, actual a center line. On certain places in the better parts of Collins Ferry, there is a sidewalk, but in the stretch that you have bordering Western, or pardon me, paralleling Western, there is really a lack of connectivity that we've been attempting to figure out for pedestrians up there. So, yeah, in the case of the Wagner street, I'll show you here in a bit. I'm not sure where the slide is, but most of those people are going on to South High Street. Again, much higher level of service on that street. It happens to be a city-owned street. There are existing complaints about speeding and necessary traffic calming on that street that we're attempting to address, but it's definitely the primary street through there. So we really attempt to funnel people onto what we would say is the correct street to use if you are trying to access your route. Of course, this does not take into account people that are taking scenic drives, you know, and yeah. So, how do we choose these streets? Really, the most important thing so far has been that we have received some type of request or multiple requests from, you know, either somebody that lives on the street, or people that are in the neighborhood, or people within decision-making bodies like the Pedestrian Safety Board, Municipal Bicycle Board, and Traffic Commission. You know, if anybody suggests a particular street, then that's really where we look first. We evaluate, do we own the street, right? If we do not, then we do not pass go. We do not collect $200, and we return to square one because we cannot shut down state-owned routes very easily, and that is not really our business to do in most cases. Pardon me. This is a little bit out of order. Do we have complaints about cut-through traffic on that street? Not all of the projects have had significant cut-through traffic complaints, although we have had people tell us that they miss their cut-throughs on every single one of our streets. So even people are using Domain to cut through somehow. Perhaps they're coming up Arch, and then I think they're really just trying to avoid Wilson. I don't know. Again, trying to find neighborhood routes that we could improve. You know, conversely, sort of, right? Is the street already perceived to be low stress? If it is, then we don't have to do all that much, right, to make it more low stress. Typically, a higher stress street would be one where we have a much more traffic, and so we would be worrying significantly about the effects of where that traffic is going. Is it close to schools? You know, if schools did open, and I guess they did just recently open, but if they continue to open, right, the expectation was that people were going to be walking, cycling, and driving to schools more often rather than taking buses. So we may want to really encourage and accommodate people that are trying to do that. Is the neighborhood lacking in green space? Again, not all neighborhoods lack in green space, and this is not, none of these are the complete end-all, be-all of the decision-making, but Western's a good example. It appears to be really close to green space. A lot of the complaints that we have gotten on Western are that there's already existing parks for people to use. People suggest the rail trail. The rail trail is more than a mile away from the average middle point on Western that we have closed. And it is also extremely inaccessible at the place where you would access it on the northern end of Collins Ferry. It's about equidistant to another place down in Star City, but to another access point in Star City, but you would have to go on somewhat of a labyrinthine route to access it as a pedestrian. People have suggested Krebs Park as an alternative for people on Western. If you have access to a vehicle, then certainly Krebs Park may be an option for you. Another bit of the thinking here is that some people don't really like parks, right? Some people don't have the time to go to parks or to the rail trail. Maybe young parents or really anybody is kind of stuck more at home. Certainly young parents or parents of young children have a significant amount of competing demands on their time right now. I think we initially thought we would all have a lot of time on our hands during the pandemic, but that appears to be not the case for most people. We have less time. And so really, again, trying to provide space immediately adjacent to where people live. Okay, so I'm going to go through now and talk a little bit about our pilots. I did not gather a whole lot of data on Domain. In fact, I gathered no formal traffic counting on Domain. We do not necessarily plan to gather detailed traffic counts on everything that we do, unless we receive complaints or believe that there could be a major problem with traffic being diverted onto another road that we would not want it to be diverted onto. Waitman, would be a good example. If there was a whole lot of traffic on Wagner, we wouldn't want that to go to Waitman. It's also a very low service street that primarily serves residential housing. You can see the stars on this map of the area, the surrounding area of Wagner. Those are the places where I counted. You'll notice a star in the far upper center portion of the map. I did also count on South High Street. The important counts here turned out to be on Wagner. Basically, not a lot of traffic on Wagner. About 100 to maybe 118 vehicles average daily traffic. And I have a caveat that I'll present after I present some of these numbers. That is an extremely small amount of vehicles. So even if it was diverted to wholly Waitman or wholly South High, both of those streets have significantly higher numbers of traffic. Not a whole lot of people were speeding on Wagner either. We did have some people speeding, but it is a very uncomfortable road on which to speed. I don't have more detailed right now in front of me, but later, if you have questions, I can pull up some of these the information and tell you, what the fastest speed limit was. So that was before we implemented the data or implemented the Healthy Street, and then after, about 6 weeks after, it looks like. So we implemented the Healthy Street on Wagner on July 15th. We counted it the month prior. And then, so both of these are all in, all my counts have been done during pandemic. The posts we had what appears to be a 50%-ish reduction in average daily traffic. And that's, at a time right now in which more things are open than they were in the middle of June, right? School is sort of back in session for some people. This type of change is pretty drastic. The 1.42% that we're speeding went down to about 0.5%. And then the 85th percentile speed, which is essentially the metric that people, the engineers look to for how they evaluate the reasonable driver on a road. That dropped as well, a decent amount, from 17.9 miles an hour to 14.85 miles an hour. The caveat that I really want to impress upon you is that the counts on Wagner, because there were so few vehicles, they are really something that you should not take as representative of the whole year. Certainly, we're in the pandemic, but that 85th percentile measure is a little bit, I would take it with a grain of salt. We just don't have enough vehicles to do this type of really strong claims on this analysis. Other things that we learned, we had lots of usage, a lot of positive comments, and happy neighbors. This is a recent photo. I'm attempting to anonymize all of the faces in these photos. When I go down to Wagner, it's typically during the workday. I don't see a whole lot of people using it. It's not uncommon that I will run into at least 1 to 4 to 5 people that are on the street. But certainly towards the end of the day, people seem to go onto this street somewhat en masse. I suppose now would be a good time to ask if anybody had questions about what we learned on Wagner. One of the things that council requested of me in this presentation is for me to describe why we thought that Wagner was such a success that we were justified to expand the pilot program. The first thing is that when the city administration announced the pilot program, we did mention Wagner as the first project within the pilot. But I guess we failed to communicate that we defined the pilot as Wagner and 5 entire loops in different neighborhoods. We haven't come anywhere close to implementing those yet due to a variety of slowdowns in material availability and my ability to deploy counters and all types of things like this. But technically, I would say that we're still within the bounds of the pilot that we had described. But essentially, not a lot of traffic. Traffic appeared to decrease. We did have a lot of people saying that they didn't see a lot of traffic. One hiccup that we ran into, I'm not sure if you can see my, yeah, I suppose here. So within the first week, we got some people complaining about a perception that more people were using this alleyway that's in between Wagner and South High Street. I have no clue why anybody in their right mind would drive down that alleyway. It is blind both, particularly right here, both when you're entering and when you're exiting. So somebody really must have had to, I don't know, perhaps they got confused and they wanted to take the shortest route to someplace on Wagner. Maybe they thought that they couldn't see the signs very well and they weren't sure what it was, that it was construction. What we did about that was very quickly we put up advanced signage of the closure about here, and then an official detour sign at South High Street here. And we haven't gotten a single complaint about people going down that alleyway since. So
So,
delete those. Yeah.
Mr. Gatlin, so I just wanted to note that Wagner is a bit unique in that it is a brick street. And the folks who live on that street have typically not desired it to be a throughway, to the point where it was asphalted at one time, but they demanded that the asphalt be taken up so they could maintain the older brick nature of the street. So it is a little bit unusual in terms of the makeup of the neighborhood, and then the road itself, which is not conducive to flying through. But I wanted to let you know that I think I was out there last night, and I think I saw, I think I saw 4 or 5 parents. It was dark out. I think there were, maybe 8 children running around. It was a really joyous and pleasant experience. So, and I live near there, so I have to now detour around Wagner. And it works just fine. So
Great. Glad to hear that. Any other comments before I go and talk about Western? Great. So Western is a bit of a different beast in a variety of different ways. I will start with what we've learned about the motor vehicle traffic that I was able to count with pneumatic tubes. You can see, I was actually trying to finish this. I had mentioned that I had just picked up these traffic counters, and the analysis software that we use is very archaic and somewhat difficult for me to learn. I've only been using it for about 1.5 years and not very often. But that incomplete sentence there, the 350 average daily, that would be average daily traffic that I had counted. I will annotate. So up here, this particular counting location is the top of the blind hill. And this is at the blind curve between Hillview and Lawn. At the top of the hill, unfortunately, after I get done with this presentation, I can look and try to answer that quickly for you. What the average daily traffic is after, but I was not able to pull that number before this meeting. Before, we had about 350 cars using it per day at the top of the hill. Interestingly, down here at the curve between Hillview and Longview, the software says that we had about 177 average daily vehicles before, and that went down to about 162. You can see significantly higher rates of speeding on this road than on Wagner. It's a much longer road. It's asphalt. It is absolutely used for access for a variety of people in this neighborhood. We also believe that it's used for access, and some of the residents there have contradicted this with their thoughts. Others have agreed with us that this is a cut through for people that are late to work that want to avoid this light at Aspen and Collins Ferry. There are many thousands of people that live that work up here. That's strange. I'm trying to move those things. I work up there at the end of Collins Ferry. We have a lot of large employers: Mylan, Nettle, Social Security Administration. I don't know how many more there is than that, but anyway, so there is the potential for this to be used as a cut through over there. There's also a bar that is located somewhere around here. There is a thought that people would use Longview and Western perhaps to avoid the state route. and maybe expose themselves to higher chances of enforcement. So that was kind of what we had thought about regarding the cut-through traffic. These numbers don't suggest a significant amount of non-local traffic that are going from here to here. So, that was definitely one of the complaints that we've gotten. We use cut-through traffic, the presence of cut-through traffic, as maybe part of the justification to choose this as a street. And some of the data is suggesting that there's not that many. The bus, this is a transit route currently. The bus does travel this whole route, and then it goes out Longview. When one of the issues that has been brought up recently very often is that Mountain Line has decided to have a public hearing on a potential modification to their northern circulator. And that modification, Mountain Line claims, was at the request of the city of Morgantown. Unfortunately, I think that resulted from a miscommunication between me and David Bruffy. I had mentioned that a variety of residents, when I was out there collecting information and chatting with people and trying to find champions of this particular installation, that people had told me that the bus was traveling really fast. It was the fastest drivers on the road, and that they had also never seen anybody take that bus recently. Certainly recently is a major change in ridership for transit. The pandemic, many people may fear taking transit services, although there's now research coming out that suggests that fear might be a little bit overblown. And so we would probably expect not a whole lot of ridership to occur during the pandemic on this route. Looking back through, when I chatted with Mr. Bruffy about this, he pulled up actual ridership data and found that not a single person had boarded between this route between Somerset and Collins Ferry here since January 10th, 2020. He also noticed that there was a significant drop-off in 2019, I believe, from 2018. I don't have access to that data set completely, and I am not a transit specialist, and so, but he said from what he was seeing that there was not a whole lot of ridership, and that the vast majority of people that were picking up the northern circulator were picking it up here at this intersection. And so to him, it seemed clear that in that conversation that he said, I think I'm going to bring this to the board and see if we can't simplify this route and improve its efficiency. In their press release to announce the public hearing, MLTA attributed this route change to a request from the city of Morgantown. It wasn't me, and I've checked with basically everybody else around here. We didn't explicitly request this. We have truly no opinion whatsoever on whether or not MLTA continues to service or doesn't service the street. We really just want to accommodate transit services wherever Mountain Line would like to provide them. So much so, in fact, that we made sure that transit services could continue to service the street and the stretch while the Healthy Street was implemented. We do not count transit services as through traffic. Transit services, could ostensibly service any one of the buildings on the street, so they are, in our opinion, local traffic. What is not local traffic here, by the strict definition, would be anybody that lives on Longview or anybody that lives on Hillview. Most of the negative complaints and comments that we've gotten about this project, not all, but most, have been residents from Longview and Hillview. You'll see that the amount of traffic did not really change. Certainly not here at Hillview and Longview. I bet if I pulled this number here from the top of the hill, it would be close to 350 as well. So either the cut-through traffic is, well, either all of the traffic is local and generated only from people on Western, or the people that live near there are disobeying or disregarding, I should say, the desire for us to reduce through traffic. You know, it's totally reasonable to be frustrated when you have to drive from, in order to access Star City, right? You originate here, you know, you might usually go this way and then cut over on Somerset, or you might come down Harvard, or you might go to Western and then Junior. Now you have to go all the way out Longview, down Collins Ferry, which is a faster but busier, you know, street. And then you have to deal with this light. Usually that light is green for the people on Collins Ferry. So that wouldn't typically slow them down going this way. I've gotten a lot of complaints about that. Even though it appears that people are probably still using Western as a through street.
Mr. Gatlin, do
Yes.
we have many more streets to cover?
No, that's
Or
it.
is our last one?
This is the last street in detail. I'm going to review a little bit more. Would you like me to speed up?
Well, I just want to make sure that we leave a little bit of room for questions. And so I'm just touching base to see where we're at as far as time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could probably finish it up in 5, maybe 10 minutes.
Sounds great.
Okay. Am I incorrect in thinking that there was also discussion slated for this later on in the meeting, or now?
Well, I think what will happen is, since you're here, we'll probably have some questions while you're here during this period. But then typically later on, council will discuss it among themselves. So we don't want to hold you over too long. And it's
fine.
about 8:20, just so you know.
Yeah, I've got the clock right in front of me. So, okay. So Western has been used both before and after widely by both motor vehicles, although not that many, and bikes and peds. We have done some visual observation of bikes and peds. There's not really a cheap and effective way to count bicyclists and pedestrians without just paying people or hoping that people will give their good races and serve as a volunteer. We have done a little bit of that with trying to count some folks, but we haven't finalized the data there yet. But we did find that about, a little bit less than a third, 27% of all the users on that stretch, this is near the blind corner at Hillview, were bikes and peds or other light individual transport users. These pictures are from after the treatment. It is, appears to be that the people that are using Western are spreading out more. We have some inclination that more vulnerable users, the very old, the very young, might be using the street. However, the count suggests that we may not actually be getting more pedestrians and cyclists. I find it a little bit hard to believe, particularly because I've heard a lot of people thank us for the Western and say that they're seeing new people over there and that they're seeing more usage from this. So maybe the way that we're counting isn't capturing that properly. Also, we're in a very different position just over the past couple months. So maybe, certainly it's raining today. There's not going to be many people out there. So let's see. One of the main sets of feedback that we have gotten about the Western installation is that we did not communicate properly with neighbors. So on Wagner, we had a very extroverted neighbor there that was connected with most of their other folks. They apparently have like a local email listserv in which they communicate. And so there was a lot of communication that was happening about this internally. When one person learned about it, basically everybody knew about it. Domain, very similar instance. I had direct email communications with about 5 or 6 people that lived on that street, and they told me they were going around knocking on doors and talking about this stuff. Western, there's about 100 to a little bit less than 100 houses that live on this stretch, or that are situated on this stretch. Certainly if you include Longview. We didn't feel that it was reasonable to expect, a block captain to communicate individually with every single person that lived on Western. I spent a lot of time out there deploying things, gathering data. I talked with a number of people on Western. We had you'll see here, we issued a press release the week prior to doing that. It was picked up by the Dominion Post, and in fact, it was also picked up by, I believe, WDTV, West Virginia News, and WBOY. There was one claim that we had published this in the legal advertisements. We don't do that with this type of project. We've had a city website for a long time with a lot of information up there, reasonable amount of information. I'm sure we could always add more. That has a frequently asked questions. It has a map, an interactive map, linked to one, and that's this over here. This interactive map, we'll go through a little bit, but I'll try to cut it short. This shows active projects, draft walking loops, and all the requests that we've received for additional healthy streets. We've received dozens. Basically, which ones are these dozens? Let's, take a look at this interactive map. I'm going to bring that up. Often when people want healthy streets, they will send me pictures of either their children or other children that are playing on the streets that they would like to shut down. This is Harvard Avenue, and we received a request to include this either on the tail end of Western or as a separate project. It's very compelling when you see the kiddos. So I am going to stop sharing, and I will share something else. Questions while I'm bringing up the interactive map? Okay.
Councilor Wynn.
Mr. Window.
Just a few things. One of the reasons that the Northern Connector dropped the number of people that were taking it a couple of years ago was because it used to go all the way downtown, and then it stopped at Mountain Air Station, and that lost them a lot of riders. I think that was a really bad move on their part, but that's what they did. As you know, I've gotten some of the same letters you've gotten. I just don't really, I don't get a lot of the complaints about it. I just don't really understand it. But there was a letter today from Vika House, who's a professor at WVU, who just loves it and says it's been great. So I don't know. It's one of those things where you can't win.
I mean, I think it's really important. All of the feedback is very helpful. I think one of the things we really learned about Western is that we should do more for communication. I listed a number of ways that we communicated. I think we leaned a little bit too much on maybe you, Councilor Wendell, to, engage your neighbors and your ward, and maybe Mr. Cross, who also is the traffic, commission representative up there. I didn't realize that the Suncrest Neighborhood Association meetings have been canceled since COVID has happened. I thought this
Yeah,
was
that's true. I put something on Suncrest Association because someone had called me about the possible change in the bus route. And I researched it and found that you could go to their website and discuss whether you wanted the bus route to change or not. And then I got a whole slew of people complaining about the closing on Western Avenue.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm trying to answer some of them, but
yeah. So on September 22nd, one of the neighbors on Western printed out a flyer and put it in either on people's doors or in their mailboxes. I don't know. Probably shouldn't put things in mailboxes. I think that's illegal. But anyway, that flyer asked people to give comments. And so I think that's why we received a lot of comments on this, one of the reasons. So here's the map of all of the requests. This is the Western project over here. You'll see the original neighborhood loop. This is called the log loop that it was a part of. One of the reasons why we chose for the first pilot projects 3 closed streets is that we started to notice most other municipalities were closing streets to through traffic. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to maintain through traffic on a street and then also calm it enough to where it will make much of a difference. Also, you'll notice that this loop partially sits in Star City, and so we don't have any direct control over it. You'll notice that both Longview and Harvard have been requested. This, if you all want to take a look at this map, I file these under citizen requests, not yet vetted. Vetted means we have not really reviewed them. We have done no serious consideration of including them yet. You'll notice a variety of other walking routes over here. Dogwood has been requested specifically. Killarney, the entirety of Killarney was requested. It sort of is already closed to through traffic, but it doesn't have some of that, healthy street signage, and maybe it could have been helpful, although we're about to reopen it. So Pocahontas, classic cut through. I think this is an example of a street that we would never consider shutting down in terms of local traffic for any particular amount of time. There are a variety of issues with one-way streets in this part of Suncrest, and for better or worse, Pocahontas serves as a incredibly important relief valve at the moment. Maybe not the right relief valve, but it's very commonly used. We have a lot of traffic on there. This is an area that's known for a lot of walking and run routes. It's already perceived to be really, very low stress. We've had a lot of complaints of through traffic on Elmhurst, and documented data suggesting that is the case. Actually, you all approved the switch of the stop signs here that has allowed Laurel to properly assume its place as the primary street in that neighborhood, and that has cut down on the Elmhurst traffic a little bit, from what I can tell. We have some requests in Evansdale area, requests in 3rd Ward, although that's the least represented ward in terms of these requests. It happens to be the least represented ward on all of the boards and commissions that I'm a part of. I don't know why. High Street, that's one we can't really shut down, although I think the opportunity was presented to us at one point, but that's just a lot of figuring we got to do. Carlisle over here, it's the only one that we have in Woodburn, I guess this is, that's Jerome Park. We have nothing yet in Woodburn. Carlisle is a very common cut through for people that are turning on Darst and Richwood here. Finishing up here, almost every street in South Park has been requested at some point. These are the major ones. Not a whole lot in Greenmont, a little bit, Long Alley here. the entirety of Park Street. This was one of the walking routes that we thought we were going to start with first on Maple and Jefferson for a variety of different reasons, particularly all these people that live up here and Hope Crest and a lot of speeding traffic that comes around this corner. We've found this to be a little bit difficult. And the direction of all the stop signs on these streets. Waitman, we had a lot of requests over here. They're not really mapped. Anyway, so that is a quick overview of everything that we've had requested to be added to it. I will stop here for now and pose to you the question, how would you define success in this project? And how would you define failure? I'm leaving that with you because there has not been a clear, nobody that's been involved in this project from a planning perspective has had a clear definition of that. You know, certainly we have things like more increased pedestrian usage, bicycle usage, and stuff like that, hard to measure. But I'd be interested to know from you all what you thought were reasonable measures of success and failure on this project. Thank you very much for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Now, just to clarify, City Manager Mazzarelli, do we have a point of action regarding this project, or were we simply getting a report about the information that we have to date?
There was no action needed on council's part. This was simply an update at the request of the mayor.
Okay, great. Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Gatlin? Councilor Celine.
I guess I have a few questions and a few comments, and I'll try to keep them brief in this spirit. I think that this has been a really important project, both during COVID and post-COVID. I think it's a really important project. And I think it's important because it helps people to see what a street could be like if it did have reduced traffic. So people ask for traffic calming, and this is a type of traffic calming, and it allows a little bit broader use of the street, which I really appreciated, kind of that vernacular. And it does slow traffic down. People ask about, slowing traffic down. This slows traffic down. I think, unfortunately, the area in Suncrest in the 7th Ward that people were concerned about, we have not had Suncrest Neighborhood Association meetings, I think, because we're not a highly technical group. And so it's usually, in-person meetings, and we never transferred over to not in-person meetings. So I think that would have helped to early on in the project have people be able to find out about it more ahead of time, more in detail, and hear their concerns, so that once a group starts getting frustrated with the project, I think it tends to kind of snowball. So I would not look at the success of the entire project by any one of the areas, and kind of take it as part of a lessons learned that maybe we could have worked through some of the difficulties a little bit earlier. So communication is difficult now, and it's harder to just talk to people in groups about projects like this when it's online. I like this idea because as people are trying out, some people, as was mentioned, in my neighborhood right next to Krebs Park, some people never go in the park. They never go in the park. And I see them constantly, daily, sometimes a couple times a day, taking long walks, and that being part of their routine, but I never see them set one foot in the park. Other people are always in the park. So I think it is very astute to see that we need both on the road options for people to get their exercise and meet their neighbors, and in the park options. And I also like the idea of many communities have certain streets that are a little bit more emphasis on walking and biking and less emphasis on traffic, so that it's comfortable and friendly to bicycle. And people will say, oh, it's just not comfortable to bicycle here. Well, if we had a few streets that were a little bit more focused on walking and biking and playing in the streets, and then others that were more focused on traffic. I think that we would see people connecting up those streets and using bicycles more for pleasure and for transportation. And I would include walking in that it's more comfortable to walk on a street that has a little bit of space around you rather than when there's so many cars rushing by, even if you have a sidewalk. So I really appreciate this. And data collected during COVID is kind of strange because I know last spring, tons of people were out on the roads walking and biking and playing because they were not going to work. Now more people are going to work. So there are fewer people. There are fewer people that are using the street. So I really appreciate efforts to make streets more usable for people and make more of a sense of place in streets. And I would look at data different ways, but I would also look at seeing people out there really enjoying the streets, and especially some of the younger and older people, as noted. So anyway, I appreciate this, and any data that can be collected backs it up. But we've had all these different phases during COVID, so it's tricky to figure out how to interpret some of that data. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, do we have any more questions? Go ahead, speak up. I can't see everyone. All right, hearing none. Thank you very much, Drew and Damien.
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry, I couldn't get to my unmute fast enough.
That's all right, Mayor. I can't see you.
If I may, I just wanted to thank Mr. Gatlin and the engineering department for providing this update. It was something that I thought would be useful for the public in particular to see, and I think it helps. Certainly, I support the idea of recognizing that streets don't necessarily have to primarily be used by motor vehicles. And I think that this has been helpful because it helps put what has been done within a kind of system or a system of order or planning, so that we understand that it's not random, right? That it's not just sort of whoever asked, that you guys are really thinking about this kind of systematically at the scale of the city and how these things might build into larger loops and then possibly networks. And I think that that's very helpful. So thank you for taking the time to put this together and share it with us.
I also wanted to let you all know I'm planning to put a flyer on most of the residence doors on the Western project and Longview and surrounding, with more specific opportunities for feedback rather than having to write it in email. I think we'll put together a survey. I'm hoping to get that out into this weekend. I feel like that's the least we could do at this point.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. All right.